Hello and welcome to the Azure Stack HCI Show number 50. Number 50, Manfred. How are you doing today? And how about number 50? What do you think about it? 50 Azure Stack HCI shows, a lot of.
Yeah, fine. I thought about this when I created the YouTube link for this show today. Wow, number 50. The first, I would say, 40 shows in German language, and then we switched to English. And still many topics we have to present here. Actually, many new topics because of Azure Stack HCI 23H2. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of things to talk about. And after Ignite, we already created some short video clips about the most relevant announcements. And 4 weeks ago in the Azure Stack HCI show, we took a deep dive on cloud-based deployment. And today we are going to talk about the Azure Arc VM management. So looking forward to this show. And if you wonder where you can find all these videos and the latest and greatest news about Azure Stack HCI, so one opportunity is to go to Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and there you can find all the relevant content. Okay, so let's start with today's session content, the Azure Arc VM management. As always, Manfred, I think you have prepared a lot of demos.
Yeah, I've prepared several live demos, so we will have a look at all the capabilities regarding this Azure Arc VM management. And I think this is a very important part of Azure Stack HCI because we heard about the new announcements around Windows Server vNext, where Windows Server vNext will get a lot of additional capabilities in storage spaces direct and Hyper-V and clustering. And the differentiator for Azure Stack HCI is exactly what we see today. It is also what we have seen 4 weeks ago, the deployment, but the deployment is done once per cluster. So when the cluster is deployed, we don't need this deployment anymore. But the VM management is more or less the daily business for the customer, for the administrator at the customer location, for the partner that does this on behalf of the customer. And today we have a look at the VM management, but this is similar to other services. We can handle SQL Server configurations like this. We can use containerized workloads like this. And I think it's a good idea to start with this VM management. So if we share my screen, we will see an Azure portal. And this is the interesting thing. The Azure portal is our main tool for management. I've also prepared the capability that we can switch to our local tools like Windows Admin Center and Failover Cluster Manager, but we will realize that we don't need this here. So let's have a look at one of my clusters. It's an Azure Stack HCI 23H2 version. And we have here a category that is called resources. It's actually in preview, like the whole Azure Stack HCI 23H2 is in preview today. We expect the release date somewhere early next year. And as you know, next year is close close to the actual date. So I'm really waiting for this announcement when Azure Stack HCI 23H2 is finally released, and also the part of the VM management. And we have 5 main components here. We have the virtual machines. I think this is self-explaining. We will deploy virtual machines via the portal. We have the logical networks. This is important to understand because if we are familiar with the previous Azure Stack HCI version or with Azure Stack HCI, then we have the situation that we think in physical network components, so network interface cards, switches, cables, and so on, and virtual Hyper-V switches. And with virtual machine management in Azure, we have an additional layer, and this is the logical network layer. And the logical network layer is above the Hyper-V switch and below the virtual machine. So it's between the virtual machine and the Hyper-V switch. And as the name says, it's a logical layer. It's not physical. It's not a virtual component. It's only an organizational logical network component, but it's required. It's mandatory. So we have to configure this. And this is new for, let's say, us when we come from the previous versions in the previous world. We have the disks here because virtual machines have their operating system disk, and they have additional disks maybe to store data, to store SQL Server or application installations and so on. The VM image is the entry point. So the VM image provides the OS configuration for the later installation. And the storage paths are important if we want to customize the way how these resources are stored in the local storage area. The interesting thing is when we think about Azure, I would say if you create a virtual machine in Azure, you never think about in which path is this virtual machine stored, question mark. Usually you think, do I need a performance storage, so high premium SSD or medium SSD or traditional storage? So you think about the performance, the IOPS you need, but it doesn't matter to you where Microsoft stores this VM resources in the Azure data centers. For you, it's important that they are always there, that they are high available, but you don't want to care about paths, about disk configurations, and so on. And this is also the idea in Azure Stack HCI 23H2, but Microsoft knows that there are customers that maybe want to specify their local paths, so the local storage layout. From my point of view, this doesn't make sense because Azure Stack HCI in 23H2 now really is part of Azure. So what we told in the previous version, that Azure Stack HCI is in service of Azure, and where Azure Stack HCI with each version got closer to Azure. Now it's real. It's real Azure infrastructure behind it, and for sure, if you want to customize this,
Maybe
it's
we can have a look at this question before we continue, because it's exactly about what the next version will bring and if this rumor is true.
yeah. Okay. So the first part of the question is it true that 23H2 doesn't support MMC tools like Hyper-V Manager and Failover Cluster Manager anymore? So it would be interesting where this information came from, because this information is not true, the first part of the question. And I can show this to you. This is exactly what I mentioned. I will switch to Failover Cluster Manager, and the cluster we will manage in the Azure portal in the next steps is exactly this cluster here. I'm connected via the Failover Cluster Manager. I'm able to go to the roles. I have my virtual machines. We will use exactly the Failover Cluster Manager to check if the virtual machine was created locally, to see that this is true what we see in the Azure portal. We see the nodes of our cluster. We see the storage in the configuration. We could use the Windows Admin Center to connect to this cluster. So here's my Windows Admin Center, and I could go exactly to this cluster. As you know, the Windows Admin Center is the, let's say, modern management tool that is provided by Microsoft. Let's have a look at this cluster here. In the Windows Admin Center, this is also possible. So here we are in the first part of the question. We are using these tools to connect. We are using these tools to view. We are using these tools to maybe start a virtual machine, stop a virtual machine. This is possible. So from the technical perspective, these tools still work. They can connect. Also, the Hyper-V Manager still works. So this is everything there. It's here. In a few seconds, we will also see the connect to the Windows Admin Center. If you test this in your environment and you should run into trouble, then always think about that Azure Stack HCI enables 300 security policies by default. So maybe you have the situation that only a firewall port is missing to be able to connect successfully. But in my environment here, we see a default configuration of Azure Stack HCI 23H2. So I didn't have to change any firewall configurations here, but I think this is important to know. This might maybe happen in the final release, that you have to configure something in the firewall that it still works. The second part, there we have a different answer. I've heard that usage of MMC tools with 23H2 even breaks things in the Azure portal. So it's not completely as stated in the comment or in the question, but the recommendation is not to configure things here via the traditional tools. Because let's have a look at the virtual machine, for example. Let's take the Azure portal. Let's take the portal, here is it, and let's take a virtual machine in the list. And let's pick the virtual machine VM11 here. This virtual machine here, this has a configuration. It's networking, there are disks. We will deploy such a virtual machine in a few minutes. When we go to the local portal, we have exactly the same virtual machine, the virtual machine 11, this one here. So if I stop the virtual machine, maybe you have used tools like System Center Virtual Machine Manager in the past, then it was similar. When we stop the virtual machine here, I could turn this virtual machine off. It's a hard turn off, no shutdown. I will turn the virtual machine off. Then this virtual machine is, from the technical perspective, offline immediately. In the Azure portal, it's still online. So I could refresh the information. I could have a look at the virtual machine list, refresh this list. In a few minutes, I will see that the virtual machine is stopped. Actually, it's still running in the Azure portal. If I stop a virtual machine from the Azure portal, I have a different situation, because if I use the virtual machine 12 and I stop this virtual machine from the Azure portal, then I have the situation. The major instance, the Azure portal, the Azure logic says, local Azure Arc resource bridge, please shut down the virtual machine. And I need a feedback when the virtual machine is successfully shut down. I could also have chosen the turn off option. We don't have the button in the Azure portal, but now they are communicating to each other. And in the first part of the demo, there was no communication immediately, but for sure the Azure portal has some refresh cycles. So this was the example, starting and stopping a virtual machine. Let's imagine you change something at the configuration. Then there are configuration changes, like, for example, let's take the virtual machine 21. I'm going to the settings, and I will change the amount of memory. Yeah, I could do this here, or the virtual CPU. Let's turn off. We have the virtual machine 11 turned off. Let's go to the settings. Let's change the amount of virtual memory. Then this is only a number. I have the situation that this number will be sent to the Azure portal. So I have to change this also. This was my idea, 8 GB. Now we have an interesting thing. When I remove this checkbox, then we will run into trouble when I do it locally, because the Azure portal says when we deploy a virtual machine, we cannot change this configuration about dynamic memory afterwards. When I add disks, I have the situation that the Azure portal does not have the disk metadata. If I change network configurations, I have the problem here. I have the switch configuration, but in the Azure portal, we have additionally the logic layer. So to answer the question completely, we have some things we still can configure locally where we don't run into trouble. But there are several things, when we change them, then we will run into trouble in the Azure portal, because the Azure portal does not understand this configuration. And this is the reason why the the recommendation is to configure virtual machines via this virtual machine management we have a look at. So the traditional tools still work. You can completely use them. If you configure your virtual machines completely in these traditional tools, you will lose more and more functionality in the Azure portal because the configurations are not anymore compatible. Yeah. So a long answer for this short question. Hopefully it could clear all the existing maybe misunderstandings around what is possible, what is not possible.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting question and a super relevant answer as well. Because from my perspective, Azure Stack HCI is, as you already described, a service that's very close to Azure. And we should use the Azure tools to manage Azure Stack HCI. If you start using local tools like you did it in the past, then Azure Stack HCI is not the solution that's perfect for you. Especially, I think about the future.
Yeah.
You should be aware and familiar of and with the Azure portal, the Azure tools. This should be your number one tool to manage your infrastructure. If you want to use your on-premises infrastructure as you did it in the past, like a kind of do-it-yourself, then maybe Windows Server is your best choice. But Azure Stack HCI is very close to Azure. So our recommendation is make yourself familiar with Azure portal and all the management tools in Azure, and then you will be happy in future and today.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is those that know me, they know that I'm using Hyper-V since the first version in Windows Server 2008. And so I'm very familiar with these traditional tools, Hyper-V Manager, Failover Cluster Manager, then Windows Admin Center, PowerShell. And I'm using them on a daily basis. On my several Azure Stack HCI clusters I'm operating here, I never miss these local tools. So I'm working days in this Azure portal and never see the failover cluster manager anymore because I don't need these tools. So not our topic today, but even the update management, even the disaster recovery, the monitoring, everything is in the Azure portal. And I think we already told this in the deployment session 4 weeks ago, where I said, try to forget everything you knew about the Azure Stack HCI deployment and start newly from the scratch because it's different. If I try to use my knowledge from the previous version, I will run into trouble with the deployment because things are completely different. And this is the same with the management here. If I'm always thinking about, can I also do this in the traditional tool? Then, as Sven mentioned, maybe Azure Stack HCI is not the best solution for me. If I say, okay, let's do a short reset and look what's possible here. And mentioned again, this is a preview here. There will be features added. Let's try what's possible here. I think you will also realize you don't need to go back to the traditional tools. And in my situation, I often have the situation that after a few hours of working here in the portal, I must really think about, oh, this is my local cluster. I'm only using Azure for managing it. The workload is not running in Azure. And sometimes for me, it happens that I'm running out of capacity and then I realize, oh, it's my local cluster. It's full with workload and I have to add additional resources or shut down some of my demo machines. What I mentioned about this preview, let's have a look at the logical networks. Maybe you will find some videos from me on YouTube where I explained how these logical networks work. And a few weeks ago, we had to create these logical networks via Azure command line interface. Now we have a create logical network here. And this is what I mean with these tools are still in development. We will get additional capabilities and it will get more easy and easy with the next version. So if you need a logical network, you can just create it in the graphical user interface now. What is a logical network? A logical network is an additional layer where we connect the virtual machine to. So the VM is here above and below we have the Hyper-V switch. And Hyper-V virtual switch. And Hyper-V doesn't have this logical component. In the System Center Virtual Machine Manager, you have a similar thing. And this is the reason why I said those of you that are using the System Center Virtual Machine Manager already have a similar experience. If you have logical networks in System Center Virtual Machine Manager and you change the network layout on your hosts via the Hyper-V Manager, then you can break this logic. And there we already had the situation that we have to use the, let's say, parent tool, the Virtual Machine Manager. Okay, the logical networks, we can deep dive into this topic maybe in a future session, but I think for the first understanding, this is fine so far. To be able to create a virtual machine, we need logical networks if they need a connectivity, and usually they need this connectivity. And we have the virtual machine images. The virtual machine images are our templates for virtual machines, not the whole template for the configuration, but for the operating system. And the cool thing about the virtual machine images is that we can download the images from the Azure Marketplace. This is what I like because these images are managed by Microsoft. These are images that are provided by Microsoft. There are some exclusive images I actually only get on Azure Stack HCI. We could also use existing images in an Azure storage account. If you are familiar with Azure, you know that file resources in Azure are stored in such a storage account. And we could also use VM images from a local share. So if you think about maybe I want to have a Windows server with a specific pre-configuration with some tools in it, then you can deploy the virtual machine locally, run a sysprep on the virtual machine with the generalize option, shut the virtual machine down, and use this as an image for this VM image gallery here. Let's have a look at the Azure Marketplace. In the Azure Marketplace, I could select from a catalog of images, and these are the images Microsoft actually provides. And there are these Azure editions. Usually you get the Azure editions only in Azure, but because Azure Stack HCI is a service from Azure, we also can use these Azure editions here. This is the Azure edition as server core and with graphical user interface, and the Azure edition with the hot patch option. Hot patching is a great feature if you don't like the time where a Windows server is offline because of a restart of Windows updates. With hot patching, the server does not need this complete restart. So the patches are implemented online, and usually the server does not need the restart. And this is actually exclusively available in Azure and in Azure Stack HCI. This is announced, but with additional costs for the next version in Windows Server. So next version of Windows Server will be able to use hot patching in other scenarios on premises, but you have to pay for it. Here, if you are licensed to be able to use the Azure edition on Azure Stack HCI, you have the hot patching option included without additional costs for the hot patching. And we
It's
have another,
interesting to see that there's an hot patching option. Because we have hot patching for the core installation, and we have hot patching for the graphical user phase.
yeah.
So how does this work?
How does this work? This is, let's use numbers. The first one here is without hot patching. This is the Azure edition with graphical user interface without hot patching. The second option is Azure edition server core with hot patching, because hot patching was initially announced as an advantage of the Azure edition, and from the first day on, it was available in the server core edition. So when Microsoft announced the Azure edition had three unique features. The first one is SMB over Quick, which is a very cool technology for data transfer in the network. We had the What was the second thing? I have to think about it. And the third thing was hot patching, but only available in the core edition. And so the number 2 is Azure Edition Server Core, including hot patching. And then I would say half a year or maybe 12 months later, Microsoft released hot patching for the graphical edition. And so this is Data Center Azure Edition with GUI with hot patch. Um, I don't know why I should use this edition without hot patch anymore, because I don't see an advantage here. I think this is here based on historical reasons, because um, number 1 and 2 were the first versions that were available, and version 3 came in this list half a year later. Yeah.
That's important to know because it's
Yeah.
confusing. If I want to
Yeah. Yeah.
have hot patching and I'm not aware that the version number 2 includes hot patching as well,
Yeah.
I use the GUI version, and maybe that's not the version I want to use. But if I want to have hot patching, I click on that button. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good to
Yeah.
know now. We know that hot patching is included in alternative 2 as well. Thank
Yes.
you for that.
Yes. And then we have an additional exclusive thing. So the Windows Enterprise multi-session versions. These are these versions here, because an Windows with single session, so console session or remote session, is the default. We can also have on premises. The multi-session that we can use as something like a terminal server or RDS host is exclusively available in Azure for Azure Virtual Desktop, and here also on Azure Stack HCI. And when I want to have one of these versions here, for example, the Windows 11 Enterprise multi-session, then I can select this version here with the Microsoft 365 apps. And I could specify a name. So for example, Windows 11, sorry, I want to use Windows 11 Enterprise, and I will add a multi-session here, store in my custom location. I can specify additional tags. This is important for later filtering, or maybe for billing purpose, where we want to see which tags are relevant for which costs. And then when we can create this, create means here, create a download job and download this image to the local Azure Arc resource bridge on this Azure Stack HCI cluster. And if you are following the Azure Stack HCI show for a longer time, you maybe have seen some information from us about the Azure Arc resource bridge in the early preview. And let's say it was a little pain to deploy this Azure Arc resource bridge. Now with Azure Stack HCI 23H2, where this Azure Arc resource bridge will be finally released, we have this as a part of the deployment. So if you are at this point that you can deploy virtual machines, your Arc resource bridge is already there. You don't need any line of PowerShell to deploy the resource bridge. It's part of the cloud-based deployment we have seen 4 weeks ago, so in the last Azure Stack HCI show. Okay, this deployment takes a while. So the deployment job will be created, the image will be downloaded. We can go back to our Azure Stack HCI clusters and look into the list of the virtual machine images. And here we can see maybe the download is already there. Yeah, here it's downloading. This is this one here. It's downloading from the Azure Marketplace. And because these images are managed by Microsoft, I can see I have several images I downloaded previously where an update is available. This is also cool because I see here, oh, there's a newer version. Maybe I downloaded this in October and now we have the November update provided by Microsoft. And I can update these images here so that I have always the latest version for my new deployments. I don't need to slipstream anything there. This is the technical acronym for bringing the latest service packs and updates into the operating system versions. I don't have to download manually any images. I just have to update the specific version here. And I can see this situation that an update is available via this notification here. I'm pretty sure there will be a question, is it an auto update for these here? Today not, but for me, this is the next step that Microsoft will provide here, that we can say if there's a new version of an image, please download this image between 10 and 11 p.m. or something like this. And today this is a manual action where we have to update it, or we have to script it. This is also possible. In Azure, we have an automation module. We could say if there's a new update, then do this and that, but this is today a manual action. Okay, we have the VM images. We talked about the logical networks. Now we could deploy a virtual machine. Here in this cluster, I already have several virtual machines, but for sure, I can create a new virtual machine, and I can select here my resource group. I could specify a name. I'm not sure which names I already used. Let's take 91. Let's take a security type. We have standard and trusted launch virtual machines. Security is an important thing in Azure Stack HCI. And in Hyper-V, traditionally, we have virtual machines and we have shielded virtual machines. To be able to provide shielded virtual machines, we have to deploy an additional cluster that is only responsible for security. So what I want to say, if we want to have one virtual machine with the advanced security, we have a lot of work to have this capability. Here, it is just one click. You can say, I want to have a trusted launch virtual machine, the whole security of this virtual machine, so that I'm not able to connect to the console because I'm an administrator. No, I need additional access rights that I cannot access the disk and so on. This is handled by Azure, and I don't need this local infrastructure additionally. This is great, but the trusted launch virtual machines today in the preview are only available for Windows 11 based virtual machines. They are announced for Windows Server also. So this actually has a dependency to the operating system. Okay, security type, let's take the standard one. Let's take a Windows Server data center edition. I will use 4 virtual processors. Let's take 4 gigabytes of memory. Now we have an important checkbox, the guest management. Guest management means that I will have an Azure Arc agent installed into the virtual machine. So without Azure Guest Management, I have a virtual machine deployed where I don't have an Arc agent in the virtual machine. I can install this Arc agent later, but as the notification here says, most or several virtual machines features and extensions require guest management to function. If we don't have the guest management in the VM, we can use the features from the Azure portal we can trigger from the host. So we could change the size of the virtual machine, we can add disks and so on. If we have the guest management inside the VM, we have an Arc-enabled VM, and so we can extend the manageability into the operating system of this virtual machine. So for example, if we would manage a SQL server inside the virtual machine, we would need this guest management. Let's use the guest management here. Maybe we have time to deploy a second machine, or we use one of my pre-deployed to see how it looks without guest management. I need a username here and a password. The password has to follow the Azure complexity requirements. And because this machine, oh, they should match. This is important. I have a typo here, yeah. And because I have chosen the guest management, I could auto join this machine to my local domain. This would be possible because this can be done via this Arc management. I could add additional disk drives, but we can do this later. The operating system disk is always added to the virtual machine. The networking is required for virtual machines that have enabled the guest management, and I will add a network interface card that is connected to my network where I have an DHCP server. So we have dynamic IP addresses, and the name for this network interface card will be 2301 VM91 NIC01. As you can see here, this is also a logical layer. In Hyper-V, this virtual machine has NIC 1, 2, 3, 4, and they are connected to virtual switches. Here in the Azure portal, we specify virtual machines with virtual NICs connected to logical networks. Okay, I will add this here. Then we have tags for the virtual machine. I will not add any tags because this is time consuming here in the demo. In a production environment, you absolutely should do this. For example, specify here things like city created by maybe the data center, where I could say it's in the data center, Würzburg, and where I could say, okay, I have the created by here Manfred. For sure, I have this information also in the user account, and I could also use individual tags, for example, operating system version, hot patch ready, yes or no, and things like this. Okay, let's have a look at the virtual machine. I have all the information here, and now I can create the virtual machine. Now I entered a lot of information about this virtual machine, and this information is stored in a deployment template. Azure always thinks in Azure Resource Manager resources, and this deployment here is a resource in the Azure Resource Manager. I can store this template to redeploy it again. So if I want to deploy this virtual machine several times, I don't have to click through this wizard every time. I can store the template and redeployment the machine again at a later point of time. The identical machine, if I have the situation that the machine is maybe deleted and recreated again. But for sure, I could also say the next one is the virtual machine 92, 93, 94, and so on. We could also specify the name, for example, as a variable here. Now let's open another tab in the Azure portal. Here the deployment is still running, and let's have a look at the virtual machines in my Azure Stack HCI clusters. And here we can see the virtual machine list, and the virtual machine 92 is not present here actually. The first step will be that this virtual machine will be visible here in the list, but not with the status running, but with the status accepted. Here we have different status information. We have running, we have stopped, we have deploying. For sure, we have also failed. For example, here I have two machines that were failed. There I had an issue. This was an Azure Virtual Desktop deployment. Here I have several successful. Maybe I had some resource issues or things like this. I can check this, can see what's the status. And when the machine is accepted, the first step is that the machine is accepted here. Then we have the deploying, and then finally we have the deployed. So now the machine is here. It's accepted, so the machine is in the list. We already can access the machine. So I can click on this machine, can see the configuration, can see the deployment workflow, because it's already an object in Azure. Back to our question we had, if I would have created the virtual machine locally, the machine wouldn't appear here because we don't have the metadata. Microsoft is working on an, let's say, solution or tool to bring the locally created virtual machines also to the Azure portal. Today, they are not listed here. And if you change settings, you again have the information there, metadata that can be transferred and others that cannot be transferred. This is the reason why I would recommend to use the Azure portal. Let's see here, we have the text data center Würzburg created by Manfred. We have the subscription, we have the resource group, we have the virtual machine kind. It's an Azure Stack HCI virtual machine. We have one network interface. A little bit confusing is this year, we don't have disks here, but we always have the operating system disk. The operating system disk is not listed here explicitly. And on the left-hand side, we have all the great capabilities because I enabled the guest management. I have the activity log for this virtual machine, the access control, the tags, the networking. I could connect to this machine. I could use SSH or RDP via SSH to connect this to this machine from the Azure portal. We have the disks, we have the virtual machine size, security settings, extensions, properties, logs, policies. If you are familiar with Azure, you know these things already. If not, we will have a look at several of them today, and I'm pretty sure we will extend this to an additional session where we do some extended management steps for these virtual machines in Azure. And this is the great thing, that the machine is manageable from the Azure portal and the hosts also. Let's have a look if this machine now is, it's still accepted. So let's go to another machine I deployed in a previous demo. Let's have a look, for example, at this virtual machine 01, and we come back to the 91 when the deployment has finished. Let's go to the 31 machine. And when a machine is completely deployed, we also see information like operating system, CPU cores, and the memory. We have the capability, for example, to add disks to such a virtual machine. We can change the size of the virtual machine. We have things like security. And here we can see, oh, this is a virtual machine where I didn't configure the guest management. So 31 is without guest management. So I can't use the security. I have the extensions, policies can be used. Virtual machine configuration is also based on the guest management. Updates is based on the guest management. If I switch to another machine, the 31, this is a machine where the guest management is enabled. And here we can see we have the security capability there. I have the update management there. So this is all available from the Azure portal. And when we check these virtual machines locally on the host, then let's have a look at these two virtual machines, 31 first. Let's connect to this machine here. And we can see this machine 31. These are the installed programs and features. So I have some .NET Framework updates in the Edge browser, but no Azure Arc integration. In the virtual machine 32, I also have opened this machine, I think, so 42, 32. No, we have to connect to the 32 machine. Then we can see this machine has additionally the Azure Arc agent. And we already talked about Azure Arc in some of our previous sessions here in the Azure Stack HCI Show. Via the Azure Arc agent, we have the capability to bring additional settings and extensions to this machine. And this is the reason why we have extended capabilities on the virtual machine where the guest management means Arc enablement for the VM is enabled by default. Okay, so let's check some of these configuration things. Here you can see the virtual machine 91 is already visible locally. Let's check what the machine is actually doing. I think there's an operating system deployment running. Yes, if we connect to the machine, We can see here it actually takes a restart. It was restarting, and now it's loading the operating system. It's finalizing the settings. And when we go back to the Azure portal, we can see in the virtual machines list that the virtual machine 91, when I take a refresh here, it's still accepted because it's not finally deployed. So it will switch to running in a few minutes here. So let's have a look at the virtual machine 32, for example, and change something in the settings. So the virtual machine 32 actually, let's go to the settings locally, actually has, check this, 4 CPUs and 8 gigabytes of memory. And maybe this is too much for this virtual machine. I don't need these resources for the machine. And I will change this via the Azure portal. This is possible here. I'm going to the Azure portal. I'm selecting the virtual machine 32. And I will go to the size and change this to 4 gigs of memory and to 2 virtual CPUs. Let's save this change. So again, this information is collected into an Azure Resource Manager template. This template is sent to my local Azure Arc resource bridge, and there the deployment is done. And if the deployment, or here in this case, the change has finished, the information is sent back to the Azure portal here. When we have a look at the local virtual machine, you can see this virtual machine 32 actually still has the 8 gigs of memory. Let's wait a few seconds and then we will see this has changed. Let's have a look at the 31 machine till the changes are sent to the machine 32. This machine actually has 1 hard disk drive. Let's add another one. So I could go to the Azure portal and go to this virtual machine 31. This is a machine where I have not enabled the guest management. But what I'm doing now is an host operating. I'm adding a new disk to a virtual machine. The name for the virtual disk is 2301 VM 31 disk 02. It says the size in gigabytes, 100 gigabytes, dynamic disk here. And I want to add this disk. I have to save the change. I'm using the Azure portal. It's not necessary to go back to the local tool to see what happens, but I think it's interesting for you when you are watching the show to see, does this really happen? Is this only some simulation in the Azure portal, or is this really done on the local host? And we will see our virtual machine 91 is now deployed. Maybe the operating system is finalizing, but the deployment was triggered via the Azure portal. So the machine is here, it's finished. The machine 32, I think now maybe the changes are done in the machine. Let's see. Yes, 2 virtual processors, 4 gigabytes of memory. For sure, we have to wait a few minutes because it's configured in the Azure portal. It's combined in this ARM templates. It's sent to the Azure Arc resource bridge. And when you are wondering what is the Azure Arc resource bridge, the Azure Arc resource bridge is represented by this virtual machine here. So it's sent to the Azure Arc resource bridge. The Azure Arc resource bridge has something like a workflow, because maybe we have several of these tasks. It's not necessary that we have only Manfred that is configuring the cluster and that is only doing one action at a time. We can have several administrators and many tasks, and they are scheduled on the resource bridge, then they are executed in the host, and then we will see the result. And let's have a look at the machine 31, where we added the disk. Actually, my Zoom is stuck here. So let's wait. Okay, here's the 31. Let's check the configuration of the disks of this machine. Here we have the settings. And the second disk is still waiting, but there it's my mistake. We will also see this in an Azure portal, because when I go to the notifications, I can see the disk is created. This job is done. So the disk is already there, but the update of the virtual machine is still running. So if I would have checked this, it would have been clear to me that this information cannot be in the virtual machine configuration actually. But when this task here has finished updating virtual machine, then this disk will also be visible locally. Let's check the VM images, because here we now can see our new image we triggered is actually downloading 10%. And this is another important reason why we have this Azure Arc resource bridge. From the technical perspective, it would be possible to always bring these images directly from the Azure portal. But if I would need to wait this, let's say 30 minutes for the download for every virtual machine, this wouldn't be a very good deployment experience. In my demo, we have seen I used this template here, and the deployment took, let's say, 5 minutes. Then the virtual machine 91 was visible. So absolutely acceptable for me in an enterprise environment. And the download has to be done once, and then I can use this image many times. Questions so far, Sven, from your side or from the audience?
I have questions.
Yeah.
Question number one is, Azure Stack HCI is meant for, or one of the scenarios is to have multiple sites in the edge. So if I want to use the benefits of the cloud-based deployment, not only the cloud-based deployment, the Arc VM management, so the deployment of the virtual machine using the resource bridge, does this mean that I need a resource bridge in every single edge location, correct?
Yeah, the resource bridge today is a configuration that is per cluster. So if I have one site with 10 clusters, I have 10 of these resource bridges. If I have 10 sites, I have 10 of these resource bridges. So each cluster has its own resource bridge. And if you are thinking about, okay, now I have not 10 locations, but 100 locations, and it would be nice to have these 3 server images in each of these locations, then we could automate this via an ARM template. So I don't have to click through this add VM image from Azure Marketplace, select it and download it. I could create the ARM template and generate an automatic workflow where I state download the Azure edition to each resource bridge in my environment. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And the next and last question is, in the past, when you demoed Azure Stack HCI, we used the Windows Admin Center. Today we did a demo and Windows Admin Center was not relevant. So my question is, how relevant will be the Windows Admin Center for Azure Stack HCI with 23H2 and in future? Is it still needed?
No, it's not needed. In the past, we had the Windows Admin Center for the initial node configuration. We had the Windows Admin Center for the deployment, for the VM management. The Windows Admin Center as a local installation is not needed anymore for Azure Stack HCI 23H2. There is a Windows Admin Center option in the Azure portal, and this brings some advantages. So I could add the Azure portal, the Windows Admin Center in the Azure portal to use capabilities like having a look on the disks, on the cluster, and so on. This would be possible. The local Windows Admin Center, and this was part of the first question we had, is still usable, but to the things like, for example, my drives, I could also enable the Windows Admin Center in the Azure portal. If I would show this here, maybe we can do this in one of our next shows. The deployment takes about 10 minutes. And then I have the Windows Admin Center in the Azure portal, and I can use these capabilities, and I don't have any longer any advantages from the locally installed Windows Admin Center. But for example, things like this disk list, which disk do I have and what's the status, and maybe do I have errors? They are in the Azure portal still visualized in the Windows Admin Center part. So Windows Admin Center is still relevant. It's still usable locally, but it's not needed any longer locally because everything can be done via the Azure portal. Yeah.
Okay, so there's one more question. We demoed in the past over the Windows Admin Center that you are able to do a cluster-aware update. And
Yeah.
if you did this, then the tool checked if the underlying hardware has all the needed updates already. So if we had an
Yeah.
integrated node, this has been done automatically, checking and maybe updating. How about the Azure portal? Is the Azure portal able to do this as well?
Yeah, the Azure portal is able to do this as well. So when we go to the updates preview here, then we have the situation. So here I have a critical update readiness. This is related to my hardware configuration because this is from pre-release Azure Stack HCI. So we will not talk about this, but here you can see there's an update available, and I could deploy this update on my cluster, and this includes the hardware updates if provided by the hardware vendors. And because they are not already today, so not every OEM is already capable to provide this additional update packages here for the hardware-based updates. This is the reason why in Azure Stack HCI 23H2 both is supported. So when 23H2 is released, we can use the update preview from the Azure portal, which is my preferred way. But we also could use the update experience from the local installed Windows Admin Center, where we have the cluster aware updating capability. Cluster aware is this update from the Azure portal also, but there are many OEMs that provide the hardware extensions for the update in the Windows Admin Center. And today there are only some of them that already implemented this for the Azure portal. And this is the reason why I see 23H2 regarding the update as a transition. So my expectation is in 24H2, so the next version of Azure Stack HCI, we will only have the cloud-based update, because then all the OEMs should be ready to provide this for the Azure portal. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, as always, time is flying. So, we are at the end of this show. The next Azure Stack HCI show will be in the next calendar year, January 19th. And yeah, maybe we talk about another of the new features like yeah, update management, for
Yeah.
example. But I think until January 19th, maybe we got some more interesting things. I expect some announcements about the GA of 23H2, maybe the GA of Azure Virtual Desktop. I expect to get the final pricing for Azure Virtual Desktop. Hopefully, it will be available in the next show. Then we, of course, will talk about this and have a deeper look on the Azure Virtual Desktop. If not, there are a lot of topics we can talk about. So looking
Definitely.
forward to see all of you in the next session. And until then, of course, it's time to say thank you to everyone following us. Thank you, Manfred, to provide all the super relevant content in the past and in the future. And we wish a lot of happy holidays. Enjoy Christmas. And yeah, spend some time with your families and friends. And yeah, looking forward to see you next year. And as always, now we are switching back to German language because we have some announcements for our German-speaking friends, and to all the international ones, we say goodbye and see you next year.
See you next year.
Ja, und somit sind wir dann am Ende dieser Sendung und schauen nochmal, wo man den Manfred die nächste Zeit nochmal sehen kann. Zum Beispiel heute, wie immer. Nach der Azure Stack HCI Show gibt es nochmal eine Sendung mit dem Erik Berg in der Hybrid Show. die Weihnachtsausgabe. Was werdet ihr da machen? Werdet ihr Kaffee trinken, Tee trinken und Plätzchen essen oder habt ihr auch irgendein inhaltliches Thema oder ist es so ein Rückblick?
Es ist ein Rückblick hauptsächlich, aber auch ein Ausblick auf das nächste Jahr. Da wird es einige nicht nur technische Dinge geben, die wir erwarten, sondern auch einige Ereignisse, die schon geplant sind. Und da werden wir in der Hybrid Show das, sagen wir mal, Jahr etwas ausklingen lassen und zurückblicken, genau.
Ja, wunderbar. Ansonsten gibt es auch die On-Prem-Show dann
Ja.
nächstes Jahr am 8. Januar mit dem Carsten Rafal, 11:30 Uhr. Da geht es dann auch um Azure Stack HCI, das aktuelle Release. Wahrscheinlich, gibt es bis dahin auch das eine oder andere an Neuigkeiten. Das ist eine Sendung auf Deutsch, also schaut einfach mal rein. Ansonsten mit dem Carsten Rafal hast du ja auch ein Event geplant Anfang April, ne? Um was geht es da?
Genau, im April, 8. und 9. April ist der Windows Server Summit in Würzburg. Ist eine ganz einfache URL, www.windows-server-summit.de. Da geht es um die nächste Version des Windows Servers, 2 Tage lang. Ist, glaube ich, eine ganz spannende Veranstaltung, wo nicht nur Carsten und ich sind, sondern es sind noch weitere Speaker geplant. Aber da wir das Event organisieren, stehen wir da vorübergehend mal noch auf der Webseite exklusiv, ja.
Ja, ich freue mich auf jeden Fall enorm drauf, denn auf der einen Seite ist es ja so, dass es wieder mal ein Event ist, wo alle zusammenkommen. So wie momentan die Anmeldezahlen sind, werden wir wahrscheinlich eine richtig volle Bude kriegen. Also richtig voll, das wird natürlich auch toll und wie du schon gesagt hast, sind ein paar tolle Speaker angefragt. Also, ich freue mich drauf, denn der Windows Server in der nächsten Generation wird unglaublich viele Neuigkeiten mit sich bringen. Und wir beide sind ja quasi Windows-Server-Freunde der ersten Stunde. Also du ja noch früher als ich. Ich bin ja dann erst 2012 dazu gekommen, aber Windows Server war ja so ein bisschen auch der Kern unseres gemeinsamen Treibens. Und da ist es ja doch um den Windows Server auch ein bisschen ruhig geworden in den letzten Versionen. Klar, der ganze Fokus ist natürlich auf dem Cloud-Thema und jetzt plötzlich eine News nach der anderen. Das wird sicherlich eine richtig klasse Show. Also, wir freuen uns drauf, dann da auch wieder mal alle zusammen zu sein. Ansonsten wird es auch eine Azure Arc Show geben, denn Azure Arc ist, im Rahmen von Windows Server, aber auch Azure Stack HCI 'ne super relevante Komponente. Das machst du ja mit dem Alexander Orter, auch ein Kollege von mir zusammen. Auch hier am 8. Januar dann die nächste Sendung um 16 Uhr. Mal gucken, was es bis dahin rund um Azure Arc an News gibt. Ansonsten bei all diesen ganzen News, die es immer gibt, macht es Sinn, uns natürlich auf LinkedIn zu folgen. Da haben wir ein extra Portal für die Azure Stack HCI Show zum Beispiel. Aber noch spannender ist es, uns einfach privat auf LinkedIn zu folgen. Dem Manfred Helber und auch ich, Sven Langenfeld, wir haben ein Portal auf LinkedIn, da findet ihr uns. Ansonsten Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk ist auch da halt auf Englisch, weil wir die internationalen Leute mit inkludieren wollen. Das ist sicherlich das noch spannendere Portal im Vergleich zu Azure Stack HCI Show, die ja nur in die deutsche Community reingeht. Also schaut einfach mal, wo ihr uns auf LinkedIn findet, folgt uns da, dann verpasst ihr auch nichts. Und auch auf YouTube haben wir ja verschiedene Kanäle, einmal den von mir, einmal den von Manfred, dann eben diese Azure Stack HCI Tech Talk. Also auch da verschiedene Möglichkeiten, unseren Content zu finden. Und die Sendung mit dem Alexander und die Sendung mit dem Erik, die sind exklusiv bei Manfred auf der Plattform drauf. Ansonsten versuchen wir auf allen Plattformen immer sichtbar zu sein, damit ihr uns auch findet. Naja, und damit ihr nichts verpasst, gibt es eben den WBSC-Kalender. Den könnt ihr abonnieren unter manfredhelber.de/Kalender und dann holt ihr euch die ganzen Termine direkt in euer Outlook rein. Bitte folgt hier genau dieser Anleitung, damit ihr auch die Updates bekommt. Und ansonsten habt ihr die Möglichkeit, unter /Newsletter auch ein Newsletter bei Manfred zu abonnieren, damit es auf dem klassischen E-Mail-Weg bekommt. Der eine oder andere ist vielleicht schon informiert worden von Manfred, dass es im nächsten Jahr rund um das WBSCs wohl ein paar Veränderungen gibt, denn so wie gestern kommuniziert wurde, ist es wohl Microsoft im nächsten Jahr nicht mehr möglich, den WBSC auf dem traditionellen Weg direkt oder indirekt mit Partnern zu finanzieren. Deshalb ist Manfred gerade dabei zu überlegen, wie er den WBSC, beziehungsweise nicht den WBSC selbst, sondern den ganzen Content, den er zur Verfügung gestellt hat, über die WBSC-Skills, über den WBSC-Support in Zukunft halt noch irgendwo bereitzustellen. Da hat Manfred mir vorhin vorhin erzählt, dass am 15. Januar eine Session morgens um 10 Uhr geplant ist, wo er so ein bisschen Brainstorming macht. Wie ist die Situation? Was kann er sich vorstellen? Ihr habt die Möglichkeit, dann live dabei zu sein und, eben entsprechend auch Feedback zu geben, vielleicht Kommentare reinzulegen, Ideen zu teilen. Also, auf jeden Fall eine gute Session. Da versuche ich auch dabei zu sein, dass wir einfach gemeinsam gucken, wie, gehen wir mit dem klassischen WBSC-Content dann ab dem nächsten Jahr um. Ja, und somit sind wir dann am Ende der heutigen Sendung. Nochmal vielen Dank auch an euch, dass ihr hier immer treu dabei seid, wenn Manfred und ich, unser Wissen teilen, vor allem auch Manfreds Wissen. Also auch dir nochmal auf Deutsch vielen Dank, Manfred, dass du da so intensiv dabei geblieben bist und, freue mich auf all die Dinge, die wir da auch im nächsten Jahr wieder gemeinsam für unsere Community, für unsere Partner machen können. Ich glaube, es gibt viele Dinge rund um die Microsoft-Technologien, die sich rasend schnell entwickeln. Und da ist es dann immer gut, wenn man auf dem Laufenden bleibt und jemanden hat, der es so ein bisschen auch auf der technischen, Sicht erklären kann, aber so, dass es eben doch auch für nicht ganz so Deep Dive Technik-Freaks, dann auch nachvollziehbar ist. Also da auch nochmal vielen herzlichen Dank. Ja, und dann, wie immer, sage ich: Schönes Wochenende, schöne Feiertage, komm gut ins neue Jahr. Die letzten Worte gehören wie immer dem Manfred, also an der Stelle. Bye, bye.
Ja, dem schließe ich mich an. Ein Dank zurück an den Sven für die tollen Sessions, die wir zusammen machen. Es ist mir immer eine Freude und macht immer viel Spaß. Und das mit den Neuerungen, das wird immer rasanter. Also von daher, uns gehen die Themen nicht aus. Und euch vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen. Und vielleicht seid ihr ja später bei der Hybrid Show noch dabei. Und dann auf jeden Fall schöne Weihnachten und bis nächstes Jahr.